I thought I was going into that conversation to prove a point. I really did. I had screenshots, statistics, half-remembered articles, and that dangerous kind of confidence you get when you are absolutely sure reality is on your side. It started at a small dinner table with a friend I had known for years. Somebody mentioned politics. The room got quieter, and before I knew it, my friend and I were locked in. You know that kind of argument where nobody is really listening anymore? Where every sentence is just a loading screen before your next counterattack? That was us. I remember the heat in my face, the way my chest tightened, the little voice in my head saying, "No, don't let this slide. You have to win this." And the strange part is, I was so focused on proving I was right that I didn't even notice the conversation had already died. There were still words, sure, a lot of them, but there was no curiosity left, no connection, just two people trying to survive inside their own opinions. That night, I went home angry. Not just angry at my friend, angry in that sticky way where the argument keeps replaying while you brush your teeth, while you wash your face, while you stare at the ceiling pretending you are over it. In my head, I kept rebuilding the whole conversation and giving myself better lines, smarter lines, devastating lines. I was basically directing a fantasy movie where I won and everyone clapped. And because my brain was on my side, it kept doing something sneaky. It kept collecting evidence that I had been the reasonable one. It replayed every weak point in my friend's argument, every emotional phrase, every exaggeration. It highlighted their flaws in neon and gently blurred mine. I noticed I wasn't asking, was I fair? I was asking, which memories prove I was right? And that is when I ran into something painfully human. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is what happens when we don't really search for truth. We search for support. We collect facts like lawyers, not scientists. We notice the details that confirm what we already believe, and we ignore, dismiss, or explain away the details that threaten our position. It sounds like something only other people do, but that's the trap. Confirmation bias feels like intelligence from the inside. It feels like discernment. It feels like common sense. You think, I'm not being biased, I'm just seeing things clearly. Meanwhile, your brain is acting like a bodyguard for your ego, standing at the door and only letting in evidence that agrees with you. When I looked honestly at what happened in that political argument, I realized my friend and I were doing the exact same thing. Every time they spoke, I was not listening for what was strongest in their point. I was listening for what was weakest. I was waiting for the typo, the overstatement, the emotional slip, the one imperfect example I could use to dismiss the whole thing. And I'm pretty sure they were doing the same to me. So the argument kept growing, but understanding never did. We were each building a case, not building a bridge. A few days later, I told the story to someone older and calmer than me, and they said something that annoyed me at first because it was too simple. They said, "Can you explain your friend's view in a way they would say is fair?" That question irritated me because I didn't want to be fair. I wanted to be correct. But that question led me to one of the most useful tools I have ever learned for hard conversations: steelmanning. If straw manning is when you reduce the other person's argument into a weak, stupid version that is easy to attack, steelmanning is the opposite. It means you try to present the strongest, most reasonable version of the other person's position before responding to it. Not the dumbest version, the strongest version. And honestly, the first time I tried it, it felt unnatural. Almost like betrayal. My ego hated it. Because when you steelman someone's argument, you temporarily stop protecting your identity and start protecting the quality of the conversation. That is hard, especially when the topic is emotional, especially when politics touches values, fear, identity, safety, and belonging. But I tried. I sat down and wrote out my friend's position as if I were their advocate. I removed the dramatic parts I had been mocking in my head. I replaced them with the most thoughtful interpretation I could manage. I asked myself, if they were at their best, what are they actually trying to protect? What fear or value is underneath this? And suddenly, their position no longer looked like a cartoon villain speech. It looked human. That changed something in me. Not because I instantly agreed with them. I didn't. But I stopped seeing them as ridiculous. And that matters more than most people realize. Because once you see the other person as ridiculous, the conversation is over. You may keep talking, but you are no longer in dialogue. You are in performance. You are arguing for the invisible audience in your head. You are trying to feel superior, not trying to understand. Steelmanning breaks that spell. It forces you to slow down and say, let me prove that I understand you before I try to prove you wrong. So the next time that friend and I talked, I did something different. Instead of starting with my counterpoint, I said, let me see if I understand your view the way you mean it. Then I explained their argument back to them in the clearest, strongest way I could. I said what I thought they were worried about, what values I thought they were trying to defend, and why their perspective might make sense from where they stood. I expected another fight. I expected them to correct me angrily or assume I was being sarcastic, but the room changed. Their shoulders dropped, their tone softened, and they said something small that changed the rest of the conversation. Yes, that's actually what I mean. That one sentence did more than any fact I had brought to the first argument, because people get less defensive when they feel accurately seen. Once someone feels understood, they don't need to fight as hard just to prove they are not crazy. And the weirdest part is that steelmanning did not make me weaker. It made me clearer. Once I understood the best version of their point, I could respond to the real issue instead of fighting some distorted version of it. The conversation became less toxic, less theatrical, less about winning. We still disagreed, but the disagreement stopped feeling like warfare. This is the part I wish more people understood. Confirmation bias ruins arguments not only because it makes us wrong sometimes, it ruins arguments because it makes us lazy. It gives us the illusion that we have examined reality when we have really just curated it. It tells us we are open-minded while we are quietly filtering everything through the question, does this support my side? And once that happens, every conversation becomes a courtroom, every friend becomes an opponent, and every disagreement becomes a threat to identity. Now, when I catch myself getting heated, I try to pause and ask a different question. Not, how do I defeat this point? But what is the strongest version of what they are saying? Sometimes I even say it out loud. Before I respond, let me make sure I'm getting your point right. It sounds small, but it changes the emotional chemistry of the conversation. It turns the temperature down. It reminds both people that understanding comes before persuasion. And sometimes, just sometimes, it reveals that what looked like total opposition was partly bad framing, bad timing, or two people protecting different fears with different language. So if you keep having the same argument over and over and nothing ever gets resolved, maybe the problem is not that the other person is impossible. Maybe the problem is that both of you are only collecting proof for yourselves. Maybe both of you are feeding confirmation bias and starving curiosity. The next time you feel that urge to interrupt, to counter, to mentally highlight the flaws in their sentence, try this instead. Build their argument better than they did. Steelman it. Make it strong. Make it fair. And then respond. Because the goal of a real conversation is not to leave with your ego untouched. It is to leave with a clearer view of reality and a little less poison between two people. I learned that the hard way at a dinner table, red-faced and furious, thinking I was fighting for truth. But truth usually does not need me to be louder. It needs me to be more honest about the ways my own mind protects what I already want to believe. And once I saw that, my arguments did not always end in agreement. but they finally stopped ending in emotional destruction.